All right, so you're middle of spring practice right now, and you guys are just 25, 25, 25. The outside world, probably the last thing they saw is, all right, 24 didn't go the way you wanted it to by any stretch. Next thing they probably see, aside from this, will be, let's see how they look against Alabama this fall. Between that point at the end of last year and present day, I assume many changes internally have happened. You've had a lot of conversations. You go this way, you go that way. For someone who's just walking in and saying, Coach, how you been the last few months? How would you describe the last few months to them?
And it's been a full speed sprint. And, as you sit there and you go through it, you finish, last year, obviously we had big change within our program. We had 2 new coordinators, different coaches, basically a new team of guys that, leaving and, going in their direction. Some guys, graduating, some guys, looking at other opportunities for them, and some that we needed to probably have a separation with. But on the flip side of it, you have guys that are coming in. We had 15 high school freshmen that started in January. We had 16 transfers that came in. And with every person, my biggest thing was the edge. It was the urgency, the determination, the desperation to go and fulfill all that they can throughout this journey. Because in all reality, we get to do this one time. And every season is the season. It is the one, all your focus, all your effort, whether you're a freshman, whether you're a transfer, whether you're a guy that's been around the program for a long time, or you're on day one. It's about pouring everything that you have into the moment. And for this team to be able to come together, I want a team that's always, player or the coach inspired. I want to inspire these guys. I want to help them understand all that they can do, all that they can accomplish, the structure that it takes, the standard that we've got to push to, but it has to be player led. And to see the urgency from them, the relationships between them, the willingness to encourage, the willingness to challenge, to pick up, to push forward, that has to be something that's led from the players. And so being able to get that all together, right? They're starting in January to go through an 8-week winter program, coaches coming together, installation of offense, defense, all those things. I mean, it has been a sprint, but it's been one that I've really enjoyed. I'm excited about, the guys that we have here and the guys that have continued to develop within the program, and the guys that have joined the program, to come, help Florida State be what it's capable of being. And, I'm really pleased with what I've seen over the last couple months.
So if I sat down with you a year ago this time, you would tell me some version of, we just went 13-0. We won the ACC, but we got to start from scratch this upcoming year. And you're trying to instill the idea that you don't get any carryover. You don't get to bottle up that success and start on, level 5 next year. You got to start from square one. Well, if you have a bad season the previous year, is there some kind of strange way that you have to rewire people? It could be staff, it could be players, to say, hey, last year certainly didn't go the way we wanted it to. But believe it or not, as much as you have to come down from up here when you go 13-0, you kind of get to start up here again when it goes sideways the year before. That's a way different conversation. But is it kind of the same principle of reminding folks, hey, square one? It
is, but it's also, you don't ever want to waste the experience. And, last year was an awful year to have to go through, and some of those experiences to have to live through. But, you do get to reflect. You do get to apply the lessons that are learned. You get to go take positive steps. And just as it was, when you win 19 straight games, I mean, I know what that looks like too. I know what that took to be able to get to that point. And you don't want to waste those experiences as well. But when it comes to this team, it's one thing to talk about. You got to go live it. And everybody has the same desires at this time of year. Everybody's talking about winning a championship. Everybody's talking about the things that are ahead, this being the best year. Well, you can hope for that to happen, or you can go make it happen. And, when you're coming off a 13-win season, there are high expectations. There's high expectations with everybody in the program, and, for what you want it to look like, for what you desire it to be, even with how that season ended, and some of the disappointment of things that were outside of our control, it still came down to what we were willing to do in the moment of truth, of the moment of where all the expectations go, and then you have a result. Well, what do you do with that? And as you come into this year, I've got extremely high expectations for what's ahead, right? And we can talk about it, we can push towards it, but it's still going to come down to the willingness to invest, the willingness to make that happen, the willingness to live it, right, on a daily basis around our program. And there's there's plenty of guys. There's 30 plus guys going through spring ball right now that were not a part of last season. So I'm not gonna sit there and just keep pounding away of what that was and why that happened. But I did learn some lessons, and from December, January, all the things that we've done, it's about this team going to be the best that it can. And I don't want to be a team that hopes for it. I want to be a team that every step along the way, our actions are pushing towards the desired result. And you got to earn that. And you've got to, from coaches, players, everybody involved. I mean, there needs to be a constant edge and determination for your best to show up towards what we desire to be. And that's where it is a reset. But as I'm sitting there looking through it, man, it's about today, and it's about the things that we've done since January. Every day, that's what we've earned to this point. And so, you better capitalize on the moment, and you'll push with all our focus for what this season's going to be, because it's the only opportunity that we get. 12 guaranteed opportunities this fall, and to go put our best forward. And I'm excited about like I said, that edge that our players are bringing and our coaches are bringing into this opportunity that we have in front of us.
I think your seat is so radically different, obviously, than mine or a fan's, because I can afford to sit outside and just look at the what. You're responsible for the why. Positive or negative, you're responsible for the why, and you're responsible for casting the vision to change it or to enhance what we're doing right. I remember talking to a pilot one time. He was saying, so we're in Tallahassee right now. He was saying, man, 1 degree doesn't seem like a whole lot of difference. But 1 degree is the difference from Tallahassee between landing in Seattle and San Diego. Like, the further out you get, the more it's really, really apparent that 1 degree made a huge difference. So then when you quality control yourself and you have to assess top to bottom, and things didn't go the way you wanted, do you find that there are just little incremental things here or there that you think could yield massive difference in record? Or is it like an outsider thinks, and, oh man, you just got to burn the whole thing down, then you got to start from scratch? Because I'd imagine it's the former and not the latter.
No, it is. And it is the little things that make the big things happen. And as we go through it and you evaluate, you look at it, it's also on the flip side. As we're coming off a year, a couple seasons ago where, we were 5-7 our second year. And you know what? There were a lot of little things that happened to go into 2022 where you win 10 games, where you have a 3-game losing streak in the middle of the season, but we're able to flip it. And then you go on a course of winning, 19 straight. Right. Well, those are little things. There were little things that were put in place in year 1 that built upon year 2. Right. And then you got to you get to lift a trophy, you get to win a championship, you get a lot of awards, guys getting drafted, fulfilling dreams. The next year, there were some little things that took place, and it's everybody involved, coaches, players. There were some good things that were done. There were some bad things that were done, all with the right intentions, right? But it was still those little things that allowed for the results that we faced, and then how we responded to those events, to those experiences. And that's where I look back, and it's about making sure that, from top to bottom, that, it's the accountability, it's the structure, it's the push. I know, once again, what it looks like and have achieved it at an elite level. But also, it's the processes that have to be in place and the accountability that has to be in place to make sure that, when a play doesn't go the way you want it to go, a half, possibly a game doesn't go, what are you going to fall back on? What are you going to rely on? What are you going to do that's going to help you, flip the switch and respond in that moment to go get the desired outcome? And, those are the things that we've been looking at when it's within our position groups, within our side of ball, within our football team as a big picture whole. And, those are the things that are critical. It might be just the smallest of actions. It might be the smallest of moments, but they're going to have, huge ramifications as you're moving forward into a season. And so, I'm excited because, some of the changes that have been made have allowed me, a little different scope to be even more hands-on when it comes to I say addressing, but also focusing on those little things that I know are going to be critical as we go into the season ahead. And, just excited for the opportunity to see that impact within the locker room and our players.
That's what I was going to ask you. I mean, Gus Malzahn's here. Gus Malzahn's the offensive coordinator walking the halls here. That's certainly not a headline I would have expected to be reading. It's not something I would have expected to be talking to you about a year ago this time, but yet here we are. So not only is there the piece of hiring him, there's the piece of, I'm used to you being the play caller on the teams that you're leading. And so you just said, hey, I've got a little different vantage point. I've made some decisions that give me a little different vantage point. Maybe I got a little better scope, a little more time over here or over there. Walk someone through who just sees the headline. What goes into that decision? How hard is it? Or is it just, we got to do it, we got to do it?
Yeah, as you reflect of where things are, how they get to a certain point, and what you want it looking like moving forward. The seat of a head coach now in Division I football, especially at this level, it's much different than any time before. And there's still coaches that will be calling and leading sides of ball, and that's decisions and choice. But as I looked at this situation, it had to be right. The offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, when you choose to make a change and to be able to take a step, with what you desire, it's got to check all the boxes. And, there's not many people, in the country that I would have had the comfort, the peace, that would have fit the way that this does. Coach Malzahn was who I got my start with. My first Division I GA job was under him for 2 years. And so a lot of the foundational elements of what we've done over the years come from that and that relationship. And, he's one of the most, innovative minds that college football has seen. He's got just, such a great background, but it's also, it's who it is. And the confidence that he pours into the guys that he leads, his passion for that side of ball is legendary, over the years of just what he's been able to do. And so, and then our relationship, it's somebody that I know I can hand the keys off and say, this is what we want it to look like. This is what we need it to be. And man, he's full steam ahead with that. And the same with, Tony White there on the defensive side. I've had to compete against, Coach White and just the versatility, the way of attack, but really, all of those things are wonderful. When it goes to X and O's, it's the mentality of how a team plays. It's what that side of ball looks like. It's the leadership that those guys are going to be able to bring because, I'm big picture setting. Well, this is what I want our football team to be. This is what I want it to look like. These are the kind of the parameters of expectation. But you got guys that are just natural born leaders and can take, a plan and be able to put it in action where, it allows me to make sure that I'm reinforcing with the assistant coaches, with the players, with the guys that we see as potential leaders, making sure that we're connecting along the ways. And if there is a misstep, if there is, maybe something that's not quite hitting the standard of what is needed, I'm able to address that head on as the leader of this program, and not just kind of go back to hoping that it gets done. Ensuring that this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to do it, and then really reinforcing that standard across all elements of our program, while knowing that when it comes to the offense, defense, and special teams, the coordinators I have, they're pushing at full steam ahead with just who they are and what they do.
If I were just driving by the Florida State program last few years, I've seen the on-the-field record, the talent acquisition part. If I were just driving by, I'd say a couple of years ago, they went and got a ton of proven production out of the portal. And then I would look at last year and I'd say, looks like they went more potential maybe, not quite as much production. And then this year, we'll see what the results yield this year. Is that a fair characterization, or is that just the way it so happened to be? In other words, that's what was available relative to what we needed.
Yeah, I think when you look at it, when you look at the scope of it over the last, I think you are kind of spot on with how it played out. And it was, we got some productive players there early. There were a couple of guys that were potential, guys. That you saw Trey Benson, who had dealt with injuries, and, this was somebody I knew from high school, but, he came in and, was able to probably exceed all outside expectation of what he was and what he ended up becoming. But, we got some guys that were proven, playmakers, and guys that had showed the good and the bad and how they responded in situations. And, I think they came in and, most of those guys had their best years, were able to fulfill, the dreams and the aspirations of what they desired within the program and the structure of how we helped bring them along. This last year, as we went through it, there were more potential, decisions of guys that, height, weight, speed, the potential of what they could become. And, in all reality, in the moment of truth, we didn't, maybe it was the production or the response to situations or things that didn't quite go what we needed. Now, I'll say that, we had some guys that came in that I believe had great potential that maybe last year didn't perform at an elite level, but I'm seeing the development. I'm seeing the growth. I mean, you look at, guys like Earl Little. I'm so very excited about what, last year was just an okay season for him. He was not, probably not the impact that we ultimately desired. Had a position change during the season, and now I'm excited about what next year is going to be. Guys like Jalen Brown, a young receiver that had high potential, but last year just wasn't as productive of what we probably needed in the moment. But I feel very confident in what that's going to be. There's guys across the board that are going through that process. But last year we did go more to potential, and as it came into this season, you talk about reevaluating how you were assessing your team, what is needed, and there's a couple positions we needed the experience. We needed guys that that have experienced the great, have experienced some of the tough and challenging moments, but have responded to put themselves in the position that they're in. And I think that was a big part of my evaluation, is making sure that we got guys with the right edge, right, that have lived the journey, that have put it on display, at a very high level of what their capabilities are. And now it's our job to go make sure this is the best year they've ever had. And, I'm seeing that as they've come in. It's very challenging with guys through the recruiting process. In the transfer world, probably even more than even the high school guys that came in, of just understanding the expectation. I wasn't looking to rent a player. I want guys that are coming in that everything that they have for this to be the best year, to pour everything they have into this team, into the expectation for this to be the best year for Florida State, as well as that individual. And, I really think we've got a great collection of young men that have come into this program.
I don't want to just gloss over what you said there. 99% of the public hears transfer portal, and they do think 1 year, immediate gratification. Let's see what the guy's got. You're talking about development. You're talking about marrying the transfer portal with the age-old concept of development. And that means sometimes multiple years in the program. I just think, myself included, I get so conditioned to thinking, all right, if FSU went and got a running back out of the portal, either he's going to do something this fall or that's a bust. And then you kind of move on. You're talking about Earl Little, who's a DB who everybody around the building expects to have a really big impact this year. And many people who follow the portal have already kind of written him off because, well, if he wasn't an immediate impact player last year, that must have been a miss. But you're talking about the principle of development, which has normally been married with recruiting and kids out of high school. And you're talking about that with multi-year guys out of the portal.
Well, everybody's path is different, and how guys, go through the journey. You see some guys that, are immediate guys that come in, whether it's high school, whether it's transfer, that have a great impact. And you see guys that grow through the process. And, for me, whatever it is, Jared Verse came in, had multiple years, and you know what? He had an immediate impact, right? He chose to come back for another year because he saw the opportunity for continued development, and, played himself into a first-round draft pick and Pro Bowler as a rookie and, Defensive Player of the Year. That was his path and journey, but there was still the improvement. Everybody's at a different place. And for us, it's about making sure we meet guys where they are. I'd love for every freshman to come into this program and to be an instant starter. Like, to be the best that they're going to, but you know what? Sometimes that's not always the case. You see growth. You see guys that they're developmentally, they're developmental physically. I mean, all those things are important, but it's also the same thing, with transfers. And, at the end of the day, you look back, whether it's a junior college transfer that's come in, that was kind of the way of the world, years past, how they would transition into place. Well, it's still the same thing with a 4-4 transfer. Now, some guys that are 1 year, seniors that have a lot of experience, there is the it is hit or miss, right? And you got to be right on those. And, we've had, pretty good success in that regards. But, when you sit there and you look at those guys that have multiple years, making sure that you're still seeing that growth and progression. And, somebody, comes in, you got to connect with them and meet them where they are and put them in the best position for them to grow to what, they can become.
I've never listened to you say, hey man, I want to build a program on the foundation of the transfer portal. Never heard those words come out of your mouth. I've heard some people describe the program that way from the outside, but I've heard you talk about, well, I want to recruit high school guys. I want that to be the nucleus of the program. If we can supplement with the portal, we'll supplement with the portal. I have always looked at that and I've thought to myself, if I just nailed it in the portal 1 year and then I get another year in, another year in, I would wonder to myself, when do I have time to dig my heels in and get those 2 or 3 cycles of high school kids and really build that foundation? simultaneous to immediate impact guys coming in from the portal. It sounds very convoluted, but the entire world we live in right now is convoluted. Yeah. When you strictly look at the high school recruiting piece of your program, I've heard you talk about it and how you guys want that to be better, but like what tangible steps have you taken? Do you have to take? How do you evaluate that in the portal age? Like, what does that look like from the head coach's seat?
You know, I mean, and it is true. I mean, we want to build this through the high school ranks. And there's not been a year that we've been here that we've ever signed more transfers than we've had high school players. Like we've been really good on the transfers as a big picture whole over the last 4 years. The guys that we've been bringing in, the production they've had, the development, plenty of schools have signed a lot more. We were just right on the ones that we brought. Now, it hasn't been perfect. It hasn't, obviously we've seen the good and the bad through that situation. But, when you look at the high school, when we came here, right, there was a challenge. COVID happened, a year and a half, we don't get to go into high school. So we had to take, a lot of projections, still building it, we're building the program to show what it can be, what it can become, so we had to take some projections there early and some guys that were able to develop and play and, have good careers here. But, you look at that, 22, 23 season as the product on the field was showing the capabilities of the growth, the way that the playmakers were, showcased. All right. Well, those were our best classes. And those are the guys that if you look over the last few years, I'm really excited about them taking this next step and, making sure that, that you show that progression, you show those guys and the development aspect of what they've been able to do. And then you continue to build upon that, as you move forward. And so I've been pleased with where it's been. We have had a balance because, sometimes, you talk about the transfer portal, it's the complementary pieces. Yep. Right. You got to be able to bring a guy in that fits the room, that fits the need, the desire. And sometimes it's the experience, sometimes it's a maturity, sometimes it's a physical development. But it's always about, making sure that, as you're building the program that and assess the areas of need, and then that you're addressing that through each guy that comes in. And I think for the most part over the last, 5 years, we've done a good job of that. But, there's been misses and, it's about eliminating and minimizing the times where you might miss on, or maybe have an opportunity to take a bigger step in that. But our focus is going to live in the high school world of recruiting, but then making sure that we're surrounding, those guys that have been here from the beginning with the right complementary pieces in the portal.
You said a little while ago, I want an edge. I want everyone in the building to have an edge. Coaches, players. We had Kirby Smart on the other day, and he was talking about NIL. He was talking about when a kid sits in front of me and the first thing he brings up is money, I'll listen to him, but it's probably not going to work out. If that's at the forefront of the mentality, Georgia's probably not the place for them. You have to be having similar conversations. And what Kirby said the other day is, now, if a guy has passion and fire and intensity, I'll pay for that. That's what I want. That's what's in short supply. In your experience, you've coached a long time now. Do you find that those critical factors are in shorter supply than they have been before?
I think there's more distractions and there's more comfort for a student athlete now than there's ever been. And, you think back for over the years, for some players that are coming up, for them to truly make it, for them to be able to provide for the people, their families, for them to make it, it was to get to the National Football League. Yep. So whatever steps needed to be taken, that edge, that determination, the desperation to go be it. Well, as you get into the world of NIL and guys that, different, your situations and circumstances, I mean, guys can go to college now and be comfortable and to be better than maybe they've ever, expected, through those collegiate, years. But it's still about the edge of what you want to be and what you determine and what you want to accomplish. And so for us, if you don't have the absolute desire to go be the best, to the edge to be, one of the greatest players at your position, to maximize your opportunity, if it's just about, to be comfortable in your situation, you're not going to fit at Florida State. And, with the distractions that are out there, it's about keeping that edge. It's about, remembering the why. Why is it that you do what you do? And if comfort ever fits in any part of the situation, you're not going to belong here. And so, and that's what, I think is more challenging now for a student athlete than, ever before. But, it's also, it's what, as a coach, it's that connection, and it's making sure, like, look, I mean, you can sit there, and I use Jared Verse as a great example. When he made the choice to where to go, NIL had zero part in it. It was a place that he can go to be able to, there was never even like discussed, thought of. I mean, he found a place that was best for him. Now, going into his second year, I'm sure he had a pretty good NIL deal coming back to Florida State as what was a projected, still top draft pick. But if you watched him play, right, you would think this was somebody that was absolutely desperate, right, to go make it in this world. And he played with that edge, that determination. He showed up at practice, the drive, the desire, all the things to go prove himself to what he could be. Signs a first round draft, as a first round draft pick, has a lot of zeros behind that contract. You watch him as a rookie, you would think he was broke by how hard he played. Right. And that's where you got to find the right guys, the guys that are wired the right way, that are willing to go put it in, to be able to go be what they can. And, if it's just to secure a short-term paycheck, I mean, there's plenty of recruits out there that might be the desire. It might be the desire of the people around them. But if that's what they get distracted by, then, there's going to be some missed opportunities. And so it's about finding that the guys that are wired the right way, that, like I said, I keep going back to that edge or that desperation, but that's what this game's about. And it's about showing up and bringing that every single day to go fulfill what you can become, not just, to be comfortable in the situation where you find yourself.
You're running a major college football program. Most people watching this have never been a part of one, will never be a part of one at any level. They may be a FedEx driver, working at a car wash, selling insurance, whatever. And they hear you say that, and they would think, man, if I were ever a college football player and I was in that environment all day, boy, I'd have no trouble with those characteristics being brought out in me. They would have to be brought out in me. That's the environment I'm in. But I'm just sitting here behind a desk. No one's yelling in my face. No one's motivating me. Maybe to a certain extent that's true. But at the end of the day, what you're saying is it's still up to you. Like, it does not matter whether you're in isolation over here somewhere or whether you're in a locker room or a weight room over here. Doesn't matter what music you're listening to, what videos you're watching, who's in your face. There's something in you. And ultimately, you're the one that's got to bring it out. You can create and cultivate the environment all you want to, but is it not still on the individual to make that determination every day?
Yeah, that's where I sit there and say it's coach inspired, player led.
Yeah.
You gotta, and sometimes you have to lead yourself. Sometimes you gotta, I don't want players, coaches, anybody involved, right, that are just reactive to the circumstance. Because if it's just about the circumstance you find yourself in, good day, bad day, good season, how's the weather, bad season, whatever that might be, right? If that's going to determine who you are, it's probably not going to take you very far. But when it's the inner drive and inner desire to fulfill the potential, right? Good Lord's blessed you with so many things. I would have never imagined, right, growing up, that I would ever have this opportunity. And so every day I'm humbled by that. Because there is a responsibility that I have to help each and every one of these guys, whether it's players, coaches, everybody, to fulfill the potential, to maximize all that they've been blessed with, to go be it, right? Because everybody talks about it, and you sit down and have a conversation, you ask any player what they want to be. Great or best is what's going to come from them, right? But who's really willing to do what's necessary to become that, right? And if it's, well, I just want to do that till I make this certain amount of money, well, then it's not real. Right. Then it's circumstantial. Then you're just, as long as you get this, then I'm okay. I mean, it's a daily drive. It's a daily push. It's a daily challenge. Right. And you got to be inspired by those around you. But you know what? You got to lead yourself with that. It's truly, you got to wake up every day and make a choice. And that's what I love about, this new dynamic of college football. Because we can sit there and say, well, players are getting paid this, that, and no, it's a greater challenge than ever. Like, the responsibility of a coach is greater now than it's ever been, because now, long-term futures and lives, like if a player allows himself to get comfortable between the age of 18 and 22 and don't maximize the potential they have just because their situation is better than, what most are out there, but they're willing to settle there, and then it's going to be one of the greatest failures of any person that's a part of that young man's journey. It's about being able to take the situation, the circumstance they're in, and then be willing to push for more, to be willing to push for best, to be willing to maximize all that's in front of them. And that's what I love about it. And it's why I do what I do. And, obviously we've seen the grand scope of how good it can be. And then we've seen, some of the disappointing results of maybe, of some of the distractions, of some of the things where we didn't weren't able to apply, that why as well as what, we've shown within past years. And so, I'm excited about the opportunity that we have, and I'm excited about the guys that have said yes to be a part of this journey, to be a part of this point, coaches, players, everybody involved, because, you get one shot at it. And, being able to capture that why and to continue to push and inspire players to go do the things necessary to fulfill it. I mean, that's what's exciting for me.
Do you ever visualize way on down the line as you're going through something? Could be a great season, terrible season. Could be a good day or a bad day. Do you ever think to yourself, man, I'm the head coach at Florida State. A lot of eyes are on me. And 20 years from now, it'll still be very, very relevant, whether I'm here or not, that I was the head coach at Florida State. I could be speaking at a booster club. I could be in a documentary, and thinking to yourself, I wonder how we'll talk about the 2024 season then. Because by then, there could be many, many, many glorified aspects of a terrible season that could have given birth to fill in the blank. We don't know what comes yet. Do you think that way, or are you just razor focused?
No, I think about that. I think about the opportunity that's provided. I also think the responsibility that I have to be in the moment. And so it's the razor focus of the day, of the moment, of trying to, with the big picture in scope. And, I do think about that. And I'm so fortunate to have, this job at this place in this moment. And, I do believe everything happens for a reason. Don't always know why, right? You don't always want to have to go through sometimes, but sometimes you need to go through what you can prove you can get through. And, some of the results of those situations I mentioned earlier, you don't want to waste any experience. Right? Because those experiences, they form who you are. And I cannot wait to tell the story about this journey. And whether it's a year from now, whether it's 25, 30 years from now, you'll be able to point back and say, you know what? That was really hard. That was really challenging. But you know what? Some of those things that came out of that hard and challenging moment, right, help define and establish what was truly special, that of what we got to build upon from there. And so, like I said, it's there's a gratitude in it. And, and I want players to understand that as well, because you can sit there and you can point to hard, you can point to challenging, and you got a choice of what you're going to do with it. You can either rise to it, right? Or you can stay away from it. And it's the ones that are willing to run right into the opportunity with humility, with passion, with, a sense of gratitude for what they can be and what they can do from it. And that's where, that's what the stories that people remember are all about. You don't sit there and talk about, the stories of, how easy things were for people. People don't ever celebrate that. You talk about the ones that had to overcome, had to rise up, that truly showcased, all of who they were, throughout that process.
If I'm going through a season like that, if I'm going through a bad period of time at my job, if our numbers are down, whatever the case may be, I'm getting negative returns on the work we're doing. It is very human nature to look in the mirror in the morning and say, I got to change this. I got to change that. You start to question things. If you're not really resolute in your principles and values, you start to question things. And granted, you're older, wiser, like you're a head coach. The kids in the locker room are 18 to 22 years old, and some of them are doing things the right way. And how important is the conversation to have with them of, hey, I know you're not getting the immediate results that you want right now, but trust me, even if you don't think so, even if the man in the mirror is telling you otherwise, you are doing things the right way. Now, some other conversations may be different, but the ones that are doing it the right way, how much emphasis did you place on reminding them, just stay the course, it'll work out?
That's something that we talk about a lot. And I was telling them, hard work doesn't always guarantee immediate success. Right. It does put you in the best position to be successful, right. But you have to go through and you do evaluate. You evaluate the structure of how you're doing things, what you're doing, like how can it be better? How can you maximize, but there might be times you give everything that you have. You put yourself in the best position. You might experience an L in the moment. It might be one play. It might be one half, maybe a game, right? But as you go through it, you know and believe in who you are, right? Why you do what you do. And that's why, like I said earlier, one of the most challenging things to our job is keeping the why relevant. When guys are locked in the principles of who they are, why they do it, all things of that purpose that they have. I mean, you got to stay true to that. And if you're going to flip your overall beliefs of all things based off the circumstance you find yourself in, you're not gonna build to much. But it is the process. It is the journey. It's staying true to that, through the ups and the downs, always evaluating where it can be better. But, at the end of the day, you can't just, change the course of your identity based off of a momentary result. And that's one of the biggest things that we have to go through, with our players. And we got to continue to reinforce, continue to affirm, and, try to show them those short-term, minimal gains that they might experience, right? Just to continue to build that process of what we're going through.
You said you've been really excited so far throughout spring practice, and you see it on the field every day. You know your players better than anyone else. We're halfway through spring as you and I talk, basically. The vibe in the building, a lot of the intangibles that you can't put on paper, how would you describe those? And then also the team in general, potential-wise, what do you feel about that group?
I mean, there's an incredible amount of energy around our program. And, part of that is you have new coaches, some new players. Even guys that were here last year that might have, been in a certain role, they're now in new roles. They have new opportunities. They got almost a fresh start as it comes into it. So, you feel the energy on a daily basis. I get to see the sacrifice, right? I get to see the investment. I get to see guys that, are not just talking about what they want from this year. I'm getting to see them live it out in the investment in the work and investment in what they're trying to do to become, what they hope to be. And so, there is that edge, and it's something that, I've been really pleased with. You feel it at practice. You feel it, within the building, and it's not just a coach, a coach pushing for that. I mean, I'm seeing players, Daryl Jackson, who's going into his last year, a guy that could have went out and probably been, a top draft pick in his own regards. He made the choice because, he wanted to be something more. He wants to be the best. He wants to put his stamp on his ending, here at Florida State, a program that he loves and cares about, and seeing him take the ownership within a team, within a group, seeing guys come in and, even if they have just been here for a short period of time, trying to leave their mark. And where it's not just about their daily performance or what they're doing, it's about making an impact on those that are around them. And, that's what gives me a lot of excitement and encouragement for what I know it can be. Because once again, I've been fortunate to know what it needs to look like, to know what it needs to be. And, I feel that push from this team and, just that overall vibe around this program.
A lot of coaches say the same thing. My best teams have been player-led. We don't want coaches having to constantly be over players' shoulders, but that requires leadership in the locker room. When you start to feel that organically come together, what does that look like? Like, what are some tangible telltale signs? Because you can't just tell a guy, I want you to go be a leader. I mean, it's got to come out of them.
Yeah, and what is leadership? Anybody can sit there and say all the right things in the right moments, but a leader is one that's going to step up and step out in the moment of truth. They're going to be the ones that say, these are the things that we say, these are the things that we do, these are the things that we're going to put in action in the moment of truth, and they go get it done. They get it done. Because, you can sit there and you can, like I said, you can have all the hope that things are going to happen, but you got to go make them happen. You got to be able to stand firm in your beliefs and your work and all the people that you get to do it with. And, in the moment of truth that you're willing to put yourself out there and rise up and get the job done and make the play, to make the call, to be able to do those things to you. And that's what inspires others, because, it's one thing to talk about it, but then when all the chips are on the line, and, if you step back in those times, and you can have the greatest speeches in the world, but the leadership's not going to be there. And that's what you have to earn. And that's what you have to do. And you need the good, you need the bad, you need the experiences that show up in the course of a practice, the course of, whatever, time of year that you're going through. But that's what has to show up. And, we try to create those opportunities as much as possible. But, it's also players that they're willing to make themselves uncomfortable, right, in that moment, just to go make an impact.
Yeah. When you look holistically, any given football season, not just last year, but any given football season, how much do you just totally close yourself off from the outside world? In other words, how many times do you find out there's a world event going on or there's a major story and it's been going on several days and you're like, for real? I had no idea. How often does that happen?
Oh, it definitely happens
all the time.
Yeah, and it, it's one of those things that, we can all allow ourselves to be distracted. And, I say distracted, that's a word that sometimes people go, well, but you can't. Where are you putting your energy? Where are you putting your focus? Where are you putting your time, your thoughts? And sometimes, knowing the scope of the world that's going on around you is critically important to success. But on the flip side of it, there's sometimes you'll get caught up and worrying about things that have absolutely no impact on the job or the task that's in front of you. So you've got to be willing to push those things aside. And, if, especially with the job that I have, with the job that these players, that they're getting to work through, as collegiate student athletes. I mean, you got to be willing to have the boundaries to what you're going to allow in and what you're going to allow you to spend your time and your energy and your resources towards. And so, thankfully, I do block out, enough of the outside, and sometimes that can be good and bad. I'm sure there's some family members that get mad at me from time to time, not being more, but, at the end of the day, it's about pouring everything you have into the moment and, making sure that you're being the best you can.
Coach, we appreciate this.
Thank you for coming to Tallahassee. It's great seeing you and much respect for the job you do.
I appreciate it.